Today we're going to be looking at the book Hurricanes by Seymour Simon and looking for some cause and effect relationships within the book. Just by looking at this book and knowing the name and seeing the picture on the front of the book, I think that there's going to be a lot of really good information and pictures that we can get from it. And before we start, I do have a couple of questions. I wonder what causes the hurricane to get its name. Where did the name come from? What parts of the world do hurricanes affect? And what causes a hurricane to form? And I bet if we read into this book, then we might be able to find out some of those answers. So Hurricanes by Seymour Simon. Hurricanes are huge spinning storms that develop in warm areas around the equator. Hurricanes bring strong winds, heavy rains, storm surges, flooding, and sometimes even tornadoes. Coastal areas and islands are in the most danger during a hurricane, but even inland areas are at risk. Hurricane season along the east coast of the United States begins in June and continues until the end of November. The peak hurricane months are August and September. The East Coast averages about 5 hurricanes a year, and in other parts of the world, hurricanes can happen year-round. The word hurricane comes from people who lived in the tropics in earlier times and saw the terrible destruction and great loss of these storms can bring. The ancient Mayan people of South and Central America called their storm god Hunrakan. An evil god of the Taino people of the Caribbean was called Huracan. Hurricanes are one of 3 kinds of storms called tropical cyclones. Tropical means that the storm forms over the warm waters of the tropics near the equator. Cyclones are storms spinning around a calm center of low air pressure. Cyclones spin counterclockwise in the northern hemisphere and clockwise in the southern hemisphere. Tropical depressions are cyclones of clouds and thunderstorms that spin around a central area. They have steady wind speeds of 38 miles per hour or less. Tropical storms are cyclones of heavy clouds and strong thunderstorms that spin a steady speed at 39 to 73 miles per hour. So if we know how fast cyclones and tropical storms can spin, I wonder how fast a hurricane can spin. Hurricanes are the strongest tropical cyclones. They have steady winds of 74 miles per hour or higher. When these storms form in the North Atlantic, Caribbean, Sea, Gulf of Mexico, or West Coast of Mexico, they are called hurricanes. In the North Pacific, these kinds of storms are called typhoons, and in the Indian Ocean, they are called cyclones. So depending on where the storm hits in the world depends on what it's called, a hurricane, a cyclone, or a typhoon. So I wonder how hurricanes are formed. Let's see if we can read and find that out. Hurricanes are the only weather disasters that have been given their own names, such as Andrew, Camille, Floyd, Fran, Hugo, Irene, Katrina, Opal, and Rita. In some ways, all hurricanes are alike, but like people, each hurricane has its own story. All hurricanes form in the same way. They begin life in warm, moist atmosphere over tropical ocean waters. First, the atmosphere gathers heat through contact with ocean waters that are above 80 degrees Fahrenheit to a depth of about 200 feet. Next, moisture evaporating from the warm waters enters the atmosphere and begins to power the infant hurricane. The growing hurricane forms bands of clouds and winds near the ocean surface that spiral air inward. The air is heated by warm ocean water, creating strong winds and forcing them to rise higher. This increases the power of the hurricane and leads to stormy conditions over huge areas. Hurricanes can easily last more than a week and may strike Caribbean islands days before whirling northwest into the United States. The satellite photo shows bands of thunderstorm clouds spiraling in towards a hurricane's center, or an eye. So I wonder what the eye of a hurricane is. The eye of a hurricane is fairly calm with light winds and a few clouds. But if you are in the eye of a hurricane and you think the worst is over, be warned. The most violent winds and heaviest rains take place in the eye wall, the ring of clouds and thunderstorms closely surrounding the eye. At the top of the eye wall, about 50,000 feet, Most of the air pushes outward and then falls like water from a fountain, but always spinning in a counterclockwise direction in the northern hemisphere. When a hurricane grows to full strength, it can kick up waves of 50 feet or higher in open ocean waters. Every second, a large hurricane moves more than 1 million cubic miles of atmosphere. A typical hurricane can dump from 6 inches to over a foot of rain across a region. Hurricane forecasts estimate when the eye will pass over a particular location, but even a small hurricane has damaging winds and rains that may arrive hours before the eye. Now, I wonder how you track a hurricane and how these forecasters track hurricanes. A storm surge is a huge dome of water, 50 to 100 miles wide, that sweeps across a coastline where hurricanes make land. Now, I wonder what kind of damage a storm surge can have on a town or a city. A storm tide is a combination of a storm surge and regular monthly high tide. When they come together, water heights are at their greatest. In September 1900, a deadly hurricane swept over the port town of Galveston, Texas. It caused the worst storm tide in the United States history. The streets were flooded to depths of 15 feet or higher. Winds gusted to more than 100 miles per hour, ripping off roofs and uprooting trees. Huge chunks of buildings flew through the air. Before the hurricane struck, Galveston had been a beautiful city of large homes and broad streets. After the storm, it was a scene of utter destruction. The storm killed at least 12,000 people and swept thousands of homes into the sea. Ships were left stranded and wrecked miles from their moorings. Even the shoreline had changed. It was now 300 feet inland from where it had been before the storm. Since then, Galveston has built a seawall that has protected the city from the force of storm tides. So the storm tide really caused a big effect on Galveston. It caused flooding, it caused roofs being ripped off of houses, it caused trees being uplifted, it caused deaths of people, and it also caused Galveston to want to protect their city from any more storm tides, and so they built the seawall to protect their city for the next time. Hurricanes are the world's worst storms. That may seem strange because tornadoes have stronger winds that can reach more than 300 miles per hour. And hurricanes' winds rarely blow at even half that speed. But a tornado is usually less than a mile wide on the ground, and even a small hurricane is hundreds of miles wide. Tornadoes usually last less than an hour, while hurricanes last days or even weeks. Every second, a large hurricane releases the energy of 10 atomic bombs, like those used in World War II. A hurricane can cause more damage than any other single weather event. So we just came across a really important word that can help us find a cause and effect relationship in this book. So I'm going to read it again. A hurricane can cause more damage than any other single weather event. So by reading that sentence, we know that a hurricane is the cause, and it can cause more damage than any other single weather event. So the damage would be the effect of this cause and effect relationship. Hurricanes have numbers as well as names. The Saffir-Simpson hurricane scale is based on the strength of hurricanes' spinning winds. The weakest hurricanes are rated 1 and the strongest are rated 5. Hurricanes with a rating of 3 or higher are major hurricanes. There are only about 3 major hurricanes a year, but even hurricanes with a rating of 1 or 2 are still very dangerous. So I wonder what the different dangers each rating of a hurricane can actually cause. What effects these hurricanes can cause. A Category 1, wind speeds of 74 to 95 miles per hour. Slight damage to trees, shrubbery, and mobile homes. Irene in 1999 was a Category 1 when it hit southeast Florida. A Category 2 has winds of 96 to 110 miles per hour. Moderate damage, some trees and mobile homes blown over, houses damaged, coastal roads may flood 2 to 4 hours before the eye arrives. Floyd in 1999 was a Category 2 when it hit North Carolina coast. Category 3 has winds of 111 to 130 miles per hour. It can cause extensive damage, large trees blown down, and even mobile homes badly damaged. Small buildings damaged. Fran in 1996 was a Category 3 and caused $3.2 billion of damage when it hit Cape Fear in North Carolina. It caused flooding and rains all the way up to Michigan. A Category 4 hurricane has winds of 131 to 155 miles per hour. It can cause extreme damage, complete destruction of mobile homes, and damage to other buildings. Hurricane Andrew raged across the Bahamas and southern Florida in August in 1992, with winds of more than 140 miles per hour. It caused $26 billion in damages and most property damage of any hurricane in history, behind Katrina in 2005. Andrew was originally classified as a Category 4, but was reanalyzed in 2004 and upgraded to a Category 5. So it was actually a Category 5 hurricane after they reanalyzed it. A Category 5 hurricane has winds greater than 155 miles per hour. It's catastrophic. Complete destruction of mobile homes, complete failure of some buildings, and total destruction of roofs on many residents and industrial buildings. Major flooding. Camille in 1996 was a Category 5 and had winds as high as 200 miles per hour. About 250 people died because of high winds and flooding in Mississippi, Louisiana, and Virginia. So no matter the hurricane, the destruction is very real. The strength of a hurricane depends on how fast the wind spins around the eye of the storm. Hurricanes spin somewhat like ice skaters. When skaters spin with outstretched arms, the spin is slow and skaters may be wobbly and unsteady. But when the skater tucks their arms in tightly, they spin faster and faster and are sharply upright. The tighter a hurricane is packed together, the faster its winds are. So by that sentence, we can also understand that the wider the winds are, the slower the hurricane will spin. Hurricane force winds rips pieces off of roofs, tears the siding off of houses, and carries off toys, building materials, and other items left outside. These become missiles during a hurricane, dangerous to people as well as property. Category 4 Hurricane Hugo in 1989 battered Charlotte, North Carolina, about 175 miles inland with 100 miles per hour winds that knocked down trees and power lines. Hurricanes also produce tornadoes. Tornadoes most often start in the bands of thunderstorms well away from the eye of the hurricane, but sometimes tornadoes are produced near the eye wall. Tornadoes produced by hurricanes are usually weaker than regular tornadoes and last only a few minutes. Some hurricanes set off dozens of small tornadoes. And sometimes in Florida when we have hurricanes, we can also see waterspouts, which are tornadoes that grow over the water, which occur over the water. And we can see those sometimes out in Tampa Bay. Hurricanes are deadly, not just because of their winds, but also because they produce such heavy rains. The rain causes flooding along the coastline and even well inland. Hurricanes of miles from inland, hundreds of miles from the coast. Torrential rains also trigger landslides and mudslides, particularly in hilly or mountainous areas. Flash floods happen without warning in low-lying areas. Flooding along the banks of rivers and streams can last several days after the storm. So some of the effects that a hurricane can have depend on where they hit. It can flood areas, it can cause landslides, it can cause mudslides, heavy rains, heavy winds, and it can last for several days, even after the storm has passed. The amount of rainfall during a hurricane is not related to the force of the spinning winds, but rather to the speed of the storm. Slow-moving hurricanes produce more rainfall and can cause more damage from flooding than faster-moving, more powerful storms. So there again, we just came across a word that is a word that we can use to help us find cause and effect relationships. So let's go through it again. Slow-moving hurricanes produce more rainfall and can cause more damage from flooding than faster-moving, more powerful storms. So we know that slow-moving hurricanes would be the cause and more damage and flooding would be the effect. Hurricane Floyd, which struck in September 1999, was a slow-moving hurricane that produced tremendous rainfall in the eastern United States. Many states became disaster areas. More than 50 people died from inland flooding caused by rains, including 35 in North Carolina. The most costly hurricane in the United States was Hurricane Katrina in 2005. Katrina became a tropical storm over the Bahamas on August 23, 2005. It rapidly became stronger and crossed southern Florida as a Category 1 hurricane. Moving over the Gulf of Mexico, it became a Category 5. On the morning of August 29th, Katrina made its second landfall, this time in Louisiana. The storm surge caused catastrophic damage along the coastline of Louisiana, Mississippi, and Alabama. Levees, or raised areas separating New Orleans from Lake Pontchartrain, were broken down by pounding waters stirred up by the hurricane, finally flooding about 80% of the city and destroying more than 100,000 homes. Now, I actually have family that lived in New Orleans during this time, and most of them left the city before the hurricane got there, but some of them actually did stay, and they witnessed the flooding that occurred. Wind damage spread over a wide area inland as well. Katrina was responsible for as much as $100 billion in damage and the deaths of more than 1,000 people. More than 1 million people had to leave their homes in the aftermath of the hurricane. In 2005, there were 27 named tropical storms and 14 hurricanes, the most storms and hurricanes ever in a single season. So that was a very busy hurricane season in 2005. Forecasters need to find where a hurricane is developing and how strong it is, so I wonder how they do that. At one time, this was possible only when people saw the storm from a ship or from land. Nowadays, forecasters use satellite image, airplanes, radars, and computers to track a hurricane. Weather satellites orbit the Earth at an altitude of nearly 22,000 miles over the equator. The satellite sends back images day and night of bands of clouds and early signs of a tropical storm. To get an accurate reading of wind speed and pressure, pilots and scientists fly right through the hurricane into its eye. When a hurricane gets close to the coast, it is pictured on land-based weather radars. Doppler radars show wind speed and location and quickly detect changes. The National Hurricane Center takes the information from radars and other sources and uses computers to help forecast the path, speed, and strength of hurricanes. Hurricane and storm warnings are broadcasted over radio, television, and are also available on the internet. National Oceanic Atmospheric Administration, or NOAA, weather radio broadcasts warnings, watches, forecasts, and other weather information 24 hours a day. These radio stations cover all of the state's coastal waters, Puerto Rico, and the United States Pacific territories. A hurricane or a flood watch is usually given within 36 hours of an approaching storm. During a watch, it is important to prepare and decide what you and your family are going to do if there's a storm. A hurricane or a flood warning is usually given within 24 hours for a particular area. During a warning, listen to local radio or television stations for safety instructions. National Weather Service, or NWS, radios are specially equipped to give you immediate news about tropical hurricanes and floods. Regular NWS programs send out a special tone that turns on these radios in the listening area when there is an emergency. The radios can be connected to lights, computers, even a device that shakes a bed so that everyone is awake and can get the information details about NWS radio. Details about NWS radio can be found at www.weather.gov/NWR.on the internet. So I wonder how we prepare for a hurricane. If you were ever caught in a hurricane, it is important to know what to do. The first thing to remember is to listen closely to the radio, television, or NOAA weather radio for official bulletins. Follow instructions and try to leave immediately with your family if you are instructed to do so. Do not stay in a house if you are ordered to leave. Stay away from windows and doors during the storm. During the worst of the storm, lie on the floor under a table or another sturdy object. Make sure you have a battery-driven portable radio and keep listening for storm information. Keep on hand at least a 5-day supply of water and food that won't spoil. Even after a hurricane passes by, conditions outside may still be dangerous, so here are some tips for you and your family. Keep listening to the radio or television for updates on flooding and highway conditions. Wait until the area is declared safe before going back into it. Stay away from moving water. Rapidly moving water, even less than a foot deep, can sweep you away. If you see water flowing across a street, turn around and go the other way. Don't play in flooded areas. They are dangerous. The water may also be electrically charged from downed or underground power lines. Use a flashlight for emergency lighting. Do not use a candle or a flame indoors if the power goes off. Use bottled or stored water for drinking and cooking. Use tap water only when local officials say it's safe. Use the telephone only for emergency calls. If someone needs to be rescued or help, call the police or local officials. By being prepared ahead and listening to the radio and following instructions, everyone can be much safer during a hurricane. People are now much more aware of hurricanes than they were ever before. When a hurricane threatens the United States, it becomes big news. Even people who live in the middle of the country and will never experience a hurricane at home watch what is happening on television during a major hurricane. Along the East Coast and the Gulf, hurricanes are a factor of life. Nowadays, forecasts combined with timely warnings about hurricane dangers are saving lives. The more we learn about hurricanes, the better our chances are staying safe.